and welcome to Chicago Reacts. My name is Lauren, and today I am going to keep delving a bit more into Elden Ring lore. So this is Miquella's full story explained, because people made fun of me a lot in that video a few videos ago, wherein I think I called Miquella a lady or something. Like, I had it all incorrect. So I'm gonna learn it, and then no one can make fun of me anymore. And that is my goal. So if you do want to see more stuff like this, go ahead and leave a like on the video, comment below, and we'll be able to do more of this stuff. Let's go. Teach me, a wise master.
For the past week, Elden Ring's massive DLC Shadow of the Erdtree has been my entire life's focus, frankly in kind of an unhealthy way. But while I was playing the DLC, which might I add is amazing and so much more expansive and packed with content completely surpassing everyone's expectations, except for the people who expected it to be easy, of course. But anyway, while I was playing the DLC, there were
I don't know, everything I've seen from Elden Ring, it looks incredibly difficult. All of it.
so many lore bombs left and right that I found myself just getting lost and constantly exploring, trying to find the next item or area or boss, so that I could find a safe spot in a corner somewhere and sit down and read through all their item descriptions. And there are so many new item descriptions to read, some of which even cast a new light on old lore from the base game. That being said, at this point, I firmly believe that I have gathered enough information and evidence from in-game item descriptions, dialogue, trailers, and even real-world interviews to piece together the story of the one demigod who led our adventure into the Land of Shadow. But before we get into it, I just wanted to go over something real quick. If you clicked on this video and thought to yourself, oh good, he's going to explain the story of Miquella that I've been really curious about, but God, I sure hope he doesn't spoil anything for me. That would make me so mad, I might just leave an angry
Of course there's
comment.
gonna be spoilers.
Allow me to suggest a book for you to read that I think you'll find quite helpful, because of course a video explaining the lore is going to spoil said lore. So consider this your one and only spoiler warning for this video, which may extend to any and or all characters present in Elden Ring as a whole. But with that out of the way, as we delve into both the base game lore and the new lore from Shadow of the Erdtree, let's finally piece together the full story of the motives and morals behind Miquella the Kind, and his quest to make the world a gentler place.
Gentler in what kind of way, though, I guess?
Where better to start Miquella's story off than at the start of his story, which we mostly already know given lore from the base game. He was born of his mother, Queen Marika the Eternal, and his father, King Consort Radahn, an unknown amount of time ago, and he shared the womb with another, his twin sister Malenia. The two were inseparable from birth and cared deeply about one another, but more importantly, they were both born not just as demigod children of their god Mother Marika, but as Empyreans, and the only other demigod that could also claim an Empyrean nature was Ranni the Witch. For those who don't know or have forgotten over the years, an Empyrean is a very special kind of demigod who is actually a candidate that is able to ascend to godhood, which thanks to the DLC, we have a little more information on, albeit just a little. Previously, many fans assumed Empyreans were born of a single god, since the Remembrance of Malenia description appears to imply this is the requirement, stating Miquella and Malenia are both the children of a single god. As such, they are both Empyreans, but suffered afflictions from birth. And when you contrast their Empyrean status against their demigod siblings who are not Empyreans, it appears that the only difference is the whole Radahn and Marika being the same person and having kids together thing. Thanks, George Martin. But while we still don't know that this is 100% the case regarding what it takes to make an Empyrean, because after all, that bit of dialogue being born of a single god could be related to the fact that they're suffering afflictions, which could be related to, you know, incest. We do know that according to New Gideon, Ansbach's dialogue, who is easily the coolest new character in the Land of Shadow thanks to the sheer amount of lore he adds to the overall narrative. You'll be able to tell an Empyrean by their eyes, which double as their birthright to godhood. And we'll get into more on what Miquella did with his birthright later on. Spoiler alert, he kinda sorta tore it out of his face. However, because Miquella and his sister were Empyreans and therefore candidates for godhood, they were consequently immediately chosen by their own two fingers in preparation to serve the Greater Will as new gods to replace Queen Marika. But the Greater Will was not the only outside force that wanted a hand in these new powerful baby Empyreans. And so it was that the twins were also unfortunately afflicted by curses from other outer gods at the time of their birth. Of course they were. Melania was cursed with the scarlet rot festering and growing inside her own body, and Miquella was cursed with eternal childhood, both in his body and mind. Physically, as we can see both in the art in the base game as well as now officially in the DLC, he inhabits the body of what appears to be almost a prepubescent young boy.
Okay, I mean, like, all of that explains some stuff to me about why I thought he was a girl. I wasn't expecting child stuff. That's weird. Ugh. Okay. It also explains a lot about certain desires and, like, idealism that Miquella has then.
And mentally, we find in the DLC that he's about that age as well, which becomes much more of a problem when you take into account the fact that as Empyrean demigods, the twins were also blessed with supernatural abilities. Everyone already knows that Melania's Scarlet Rod also came with the ability to sap and steal the life out of others, which we've all enjoyed so much dealing with the past 2 years. But Miquella...
I feel like, yeah, a lot of the time you get like a child with magic powers or whatever, super special abilities. It oftentimes is bad. Like in, the first thing I thought of was like Claudia in Interview with a Vampire, just like giving a child, like with someone who reacts like a child and whose emotions are childish, an immense amount of power. It tends to go poorly if they don't have anyone to like help them with it.
The childlike just so happened to also have the ability to coerce people into falling in love with or becoming otherwise captivated by him, which is referred to at several points in the DLC as him stealing their hearts. And this power to captivate people and impose his will over theirs is what caused his sister to refer to him as the most fearsome of all the Empyreans. Yeah, and for Ansbach to say that Miquella the Kind is a monster, pure and radiant, he wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There is nothing more terrifying.
I mean, yeah, just imagine like someone who can just, by existing, makes you love them and want to do everything you can for them.
Which is pretty blatant and leaves little to the imagination regarding Miquella's mind-controlling abilities while also acknowledging the purity and radiance of his childlike intentions. And that is exactly what Miquella the Kind has done countless times over the course of his life to achieve a world that he promised to make. If there's one thing that's true about Miquella though, regardless of his powers or afflictions or status as an Empyrean, it is that he earned his title of the Kind by being extremely kind-natured in general. And we have tons of evidence to prove his actual kind nature, which peaks in the DLC. One of the new characters that we meet in the Land of Shadow is a lady named Freya, who actually used to be a Redmane warrior who fought under Radahn. According to her backstory, at one point she was among Radahn's forces fighting in Caelid after the Scarlet Rot broke out, which means that it was most likely after Radahn and Melania's battle, which we'll circle back to later on in the video. One day, while Freya was fighting most likely against Melania's Cleanrot Knights in the swamp of Aeonia, she was inflicted with a terrible wound right in the middle of her face, which then began almost immediately to fester with a scarlet rot infection. She was immobilized, feverish, in great pain, and expecting entirely to die and also abandoned by the rest of the Redmanes, until Miquella found her. Now, it's not entirely clear what he was doing down here in Caelid after the Scarlet Rot broke out, which appears to contrast the previously assumed lore conclusion that he was inside the Haligtree, being stolen away at this time by his other brother Mohg, but we'll get to that a bit later. Regardless, he found Freya and kissed her wound, which healed it, draining the poison entirely. Freya's armor even still depicts her facial scar to this day, and she claims that it has become her compass. Meaning this show of extreme kindness from Miquella is why she decided to follow him after her previous leader Radahn went all rot crazy.
Well, I feel like also saving people like that, especially if you've got an ability to make them like you anyway, like that's just a real simple way to make sure you always have a big army.
Miquella is also responsible for the innovative creation of unalloyed gold as both a new order and technology. And his entire reasoning behind this was to find a way to cure his sister. Not himself, who was also afflicted in a different way, but his sister, who was rotting away day by day. He took her burden onto himself. And we can see evidence of his efforts in the unalloyed gold needle, which actually is successful in at least halting the progression of scarlet rot, which we can see from Millicent's questline, as well as Malenia's unalloyed golden armor, that was clearly crafted for her by her own loving twin brother. We also have no records anywhere of anyone having a problem with Miquella at any time. Well, until Ansbach and St. Trina in recent times, that is. Which means that he was on good terms with pretty much everyone, including his older brother Godwyn, who he and Malenia were depicted as being very close to. This statue seems to imply that Godwyn may have even comforted the twins in their afflictions. And clearly Miquella cared deeply for Godwyn because he crafted the golden epitaph sword in commemoration of Godwyn's unfortunate half-death at the hands of their other Empyrean sister, Ronnie the Witch.
So many sisters
and brothers. Individual kind actions, which are prevalent pretty much everywhere, and then even detailed in descriptions like the Sacred Crown Helm, which claims that Miquella would bless the low and the meek. His good nature is proven even more so by his lofty promise that he made to his sister, and also to his brother Radahn, to make the world a gentler place for everyone. Which he determined in his heart to do out of a crushing feeling of guilt regarding the sins of his mother. You know, the whole sealing away the land of shadow in shadow, commanding her son Mesmer to crusade against the Hornset and impale and burn them alive mercilessly, then sealing him away, etc., which I'll go into with much more detail in another video coming very soon, detailing Marika's updated story, as well as her village of birth and the fate of her fellow shamans, and why all of her actions are actually somewhat justified. And it all has to do with it.
Thank you. No thanks. What the hell? All right. Okay. I really thought because you have to defeat Miquella, right? Like, isn't the whole point it's like they're bad guys, I thought.
Couple pots full of living meat. So if you would be so kind, be like Miquella and make sure you're subscribed to stick around when that happens. It only takes a second and you can always unsubscribe later if I lose my touch. But anyway, I believe the lore indicates that Miquella tried several different ways to achieve this goal of righting his mother's wrongs. The first method he tried is found in the base game and is called the Haligtree. See, in order to make the world of the lands between a gentler place that's kind and accepting of all, he knew that he would need to do things his own way and therefore set up a new order entirely and establish a new source of grace. So to do this, his initial plan was to create another Erdtree entirely, which would enable this new order by providing a new source of grace, just like the regular Erdtree. It is said that he watered the Haligtree with his own blood in order to promote its growth, which I can only assume he did because Marika likely performed something similar for the Erdtree and Scadutree. The Haligtree did become at least a temporary sanctuary for all who desired such protection, with many groups of aforementioned downtrodden, lowly, and meek individuals ending up there seeking sanctuary, the most famous of which would be the Albinorics, who all claimed the Haligtree to be their home destination, though we actually don't see a single Albinoric present, aside from possibly Knight Loretta.
Cocoons are actually the exact... Oh, okay. Sure. I'm not entirely sure what an Albinoric is. Maybe I should have watched a different video first. I try and get like a general vibe of this world. I have watched one or two, but I just it's been a while.
However, even though the Haligtree did physically grow quite a bit, I mean, it's way bigger than any plant I've ever tried growing, although I didn't try watering them with my blood, and, you know, maybe that's why. But it is also said that the Haligtree ultimately failed to grow into an Erdtree, and eventually died. And when Malenia returned to the Haligtree's roots to be with her brother, who was no longer present, awaiting his return, she brought with her the scarlet rot, and even bloomed once again right at its roots, infecting the entire tree and many who resided there.
Poor Malenia was just making things worse just by existing. That sucks. That's really unfortunate that because it seems like some of these people, if they hadn't been cursed with these things, maybe actually wouldn't have been so bad.
Debate and speculate over why the Haligtree was unsuccessful for days. But to me, the most logical conclusion, especially given the new lore of the DLC, is that growing an Erdtree is a divine action. So therefore, one must be a god. The Hornsent character appears to claim that the Erdtree is in fact divine in nature, the same way Marika herself is. And we know that the Erdtree essentially acts as a superconductor for Marika's grace, splooging it all over the lands between, and I promise to never say splooge again, as well as providing several other divine benefits for its denizens, such as its due. So if this is true, then clearly, even though Miquella was an Empyrean, he was never going to be able to create another Erdtree unless he became a god, like his mother before him. And this is
who knows what that'll do to you.
The new lore of the DLC really starts to shine. After the Haligtree's failure, I believe Miquella purposed in his heart more than ever before to become a god and invoke his new order. And this is where things begin to take a darker turn. Prior to Shadow of the Erdtree's release, we all assumed that Miquella was torn out from his position within the Haligtree roots based on Gideon Ofnir's dialogue stating that someone cut the tree open and absconded with his infant form. And after we encounter and defeat Mohg, the Lord of Blood...
Well, that did just say it was an assumption. We don't know for sure that's what happened.
We can literally see Miquella's body huddled inside a cocoon inside a pelvic bone. And telling Gideon about this discovery leads him to say that Miquella was with the Lord of Blood after all. And given the remembrance of Mohg's description, which
wishing to raise Miquella into full godhood, Mohg wished to be his consort, taking the role of monarch. But no matter how much his bloody bedchamber he tried to share, he received no response from the young Empyrean. Okay, so Miquella's like, yeah, you want me, but babe, no.
Blatantly says that Mohg wished to become consort to Miquella and tried sharing his bloody bedchamber with the young Empyrean, and the rather blatant image we were given of Mohg literally carrying a sleeping little Miquella in his arm. The case seemed rather open and shut. Creepy half-brother Mohg had a thing for his little brother and wanted to roofie him, steal him away, then marry him. However, since the DLC released, we have reason to believe that this is...
That might be the other reason I automatically assumed Miquella was female. First, his name ends in an A, and in the Western culture, in Western culture, names that end in A are often feminine. Also, I think I just went full on straight to the Lannisters, which is a male and a female couple, and the fact that he was, I went to a heteronormative place apparently here.
Is far from the full story. As a reminder, in the first place, due to Freya's testimony of Miquella being present in the swamp of Aeonia after the rot had begun to spread through the land, we know that Miquella had left the Haligtree of his own accord. And due to Ansbach's dialogue in the specimen storehouse, we also know that Miquella wasn't the one who was abducted by Mohg. It's actually more like the other way around. Miquella is the one who went to Mohg himself and
because he can get him, that makes more sense, because he can enchant people to love him. He doesn't have to do anything about it. But he can make them do whatever he wants.
Enchanted Mohg with his heart-stealing powers, forcing Mohg to fall for his little brother and believe the lie that he would be consort to him, heralding in their new Godwyn dynasty. Due to the fact that Miquella was freely moving about the world and not present in a cocoon when Mohg was carrying him away, I also believe that the entire cocoon thing was something Mohg created, possibly under the command of Miquella in order to encapsulate and fuse the two of them, merging their blood together in a bloody bedchamber, and granting Miquella access to Mohg's omen blood, which I also believe clearly meant that Mohg, and by extension Morgott, had a connection to the Hornsent and therefore the Land of Shadow, and Miquella wanted access to the Land of Shadow by mingling his blood with his brother's. And in case you were wondering, there are many reasons to believe that the entirety of the Land of Shadow is covered in omen symbology, which has ties to both the Hornsent and even the Fell God, but that is more than enough for another video entirely, which I'll cover in the Marika video coming up. Ansbach, who at one point was the captain of Mohg's Pureblood Knights, also claims that he tried to stop this and challenge Miquella, but at that moment, Miquella also enchanted Ansbach's heart, wiping his memory and causing him to stand down and follow Miquella, albeit a bit hesitantly, since Ansbach asks the tarnished player to figure out what Miquella's real intentions are in the Land of Shadow.
See? Okay, look, and again, even if his original intention, this is why I was like, okay, it's creepy when children have that A, that much power, and B, that much idealism, because they have such, and like his brain is childish, right? But he's got a lot of life lived and a lot of experience, but you're still going to react in a childish way. And with this like pure black and white, like full idealism kind of way. But it's like, but I can make people do whatever I want. Which is like, I feel like a big deal in the Umbrella Academy with Allison's character, who can just be like, hey, I heard a rumor that you XYZ, and she can just bend reality to her will in that way. And like how much that is shown to be a bad thing. So he can do that too. He can make people do whatever he wants. And then it's like, he wants to create a new world. And he wants to make it a better world where no one's hurt, right? But like, people who are willing to do something like that, willing to just like take away the choices of so many people, and like, they're definitely, eventually, I feel like they always go down a really, really dark path, even if they don't, and they just see it as the right thing to do. And so they can't be swayed from it, but like, it ends up, they make things so much more horrifying. Ugh, okay.
Ansbach remained enchanted all the way until the spell was broken once Miquella discarded his own great rune in the Land of Shadow, after which he began to remember all these details, also proving that Miquella was specifically blocking these memories from Ansbach's mind. He then goes on to mention that Mohg's body has been stolen away and taken straight to Miquella. And as a really cool side note, I also realized while I was writing this that they were already giving us hints of this in the base game. Once we defeat the other Omen twin, Morgott, for the second time, his body is shown to wither up and is then located at the foot of the Erd Tree, and is even discovered later by his father Godfrey. But the same doesn't happen with Mohg after his defeat. Of course, none of us really caught that since all the other bosses in the game seem to also fade into nothingness, but the foreshadowing that the body of Omen twins is special in some way is very cool to see, in my opinion, 2 years later. But anyway, Miquella's plan for Mohg's body was to use it as a vessel for his promised Lord Consort, none other than the Lion himself, General Radahn. We also know that at some point, Miquella appointed specialized knights known as the Needle Knights who possessed the abilities of Miquella's cleansing needles for an unclear purpose, the only remaining of which is Needle Knight Leda, you know, the one who actually invites us to the Land of Shadow at Miquella's cocoon, who also just so happened to kill all of the other Needle Knights, believing them all to be unworthy of Miquella. I'm also planning on covering the stories of all of Miquella's squad in the DLC in a future video, by the way. Did I mention that you should be subscribed? But anyway, we can only assume that Miquella appointed the Needle Knights because he knew that once he started, you know, forcing people, including even other demigod lords, into his service, that things had the potential to get a bit testy should anyone have a problem with this, and therefore he might have needed some muscle, but that's just my speculation. Another possibility, given that they're Needle Knights, is that they were tasked with essentially running around the world curing everyone of ailments using their Miquellan needles. And we can even see
that gets people on his side too. Just like, hey, Miquella's curing people of being sick. You know, catch more flies with honey, etc., but you still end up catching those flies.
Leda's skill, called the Needle Piercer, generates 10 golden needles that do in fact purge all ailments and special effects on their target. Clearly the influence of Miquella. But we have no records of anything like this happening in the Lands Between, and additionally you would think that if this really were the case, they'd be Miquella's Needle Clerics, or maybe his Needle Monks, not Knights, which implies that they would be in combat. For now though, the lore behind the Needle Knights remains a mystery. But back to Miquella's journey through the Land of Shadow. Once his blood was fused with Mohg's, he was able to enter the Land of Shadow. And this is also a bit of a mystery because his physical body is still present in the cocoon while he's also physically present in the Land of Shadow. If we contrast this with how we enter the Land of Shadow, we do touch the withered arm and then physically get transported as well, which we know is a physical transportation because we can gain weapons and items and armor that we can then bring back with us into the Lands Between. The thing is, Leda claims that Miquella is already in the Land of Shadow at the time that you touch the withered arm. So either his body was physically duplicated into the Land of Shadow, or he's not actually physically present in the Land of Shadow and it's just kind of a metaphysical projection of sorts. But regardless, that's neither here nor there. We do know that either way he entered the Land of Shadow, and the first image we were given of the Land of Shadow was of Miquella, right?
That's interesting with the wheat and everything. It's kind of Egyptian, like with the Field of Reeds.
riding through Spirit Grave grass on the back of Torrent.
Spirit Grave
And I'll be
grass.
honest, we still have no idea why Miquella is on Torrent here. I'm just gonna be that guy and say that this is just a Torrent, or rather a spectral steed that simply looks like Torrent, since Miquella is literally running around the Land of Shadow at the same time that we are, just a bit ahead of us, so there's no way that it's our Torrent. This is proven by several things, like the fact that Leda writes in her notes that she left for us that Miquella is currently heading to the Gate of Divinity, and that he wasn't able to enter the Gate of Divinity within the floating city of Anir Ilum until we burned the sealing tree, or the fact that he wasn't even able to obtain the body of Mohg or the soul of Radahn until we, the player tarnished, killed them both. So in my opinion, Torrent is simply one kind of the spectral steed, another of which Miquella also possesses.
So it sounds like we're kind of working for him without realizing we're working for him. But that would make sense too if Leda is one of his knights and she wanted us to go into... Ooh.
Anyway, apparently either out of guilt of his bloodline or because it's necessary to obtain godhood, Miquella began literally disposing parts of his body all over the place. His Empyrean eye, his arm, his great rune, and even his other self, Saint Trina, who is referred to as his love. It's actually because Saint Trina was discarded and left for dead in the depths beneath the Cerulean coast that we know of Miquella's guilt that he feels. Saint Trina urges the player tarnished to actually kill Miquella and prevent him from becoming a god, claiming that godhood would be a prison, and asks us to grant him forgiveness.
Because again, I mean, I understand that too, because it's just like, he thinks he's doing right, but I feel like becoming a god would poison him. That's what I asked at the beginning. It's like, but what becomes of you once you leave behind any of your humanity? Because if you're a demigod, some part human, or at the least part mortal, you know? And like, I feel like having mortality and like a bit of like, you know, even metaphorical humanity, it's like, I think that's very important. But if he like loses even that much, that he wouldn't be happy. It would poison him.
Clearly signifying that Miquella feels like he needs to be forgiven, likely for the sins of his mother. This godhood being a prison bit that Saint Trina talks about can also be seen in Marika's story, since she is quite literally imprisoned within the Erdtree for acting out of line, and has even tasked Smithmaster Hugh with forging a weapon that can kill a god. In other words, herself. Because like Trina says, a caged divinity is beyond saving. But this doesn't matter too much because Miquella is ultimately successful in shedding his flesh, his strength, and his fate, and approaches the Gate of Divinity all the same. And after the player tarnished overcomes Needle Knight Leda and her allies in a very climactic and emotional battle to the death, we're finally able to approach the Gate of Divinity ourselves. And the first person we see standing at the gate is none other than Radahn, almost fully resurrected in the omen-laden body of Mohg, even showcasing some omen horns sticking out from underneath his armor. Ooh. Now that we've shed a new light on what Miquella did in the events leading up to and entering the Land of Shadow, let's focus now on what his history is with his other brother, Starscourge Radahn. First off, let's talk about why Radahn, of all people, would be chosen to be Miquella's consort. In the first place, like we talked about already, at some point Miquella did purpose in his heart to become a god in order to bring about a new age of gentleness. However, we have reason to believe that one cannot actually become a god at the Gate of Divinity unless two factors are met. One, you must be an Empyrean, and two, you must have a Lord Consort. The entirety of Elden Ring is based off of the imagery of two. Every god has their lord, everyone has a body and a soul. There are several sets of twins in the game, and not to mention the two fingers themselves are a pretty clear picture of the concept of two. I mean, all they can do is a peace sign. This is likely the design of the Greater Will, and is also likely why the Frenzied Flame created the three fingers out of spite for the Greater Will's two. But back to Radahn. Miquella knew that if he ever wanted to become a god, he needed a lord that would rule at his side, since a god apparently is more or less imprisoned, which by the way finally gives us a purpose for what an Elden Lord even is in the first place. Anyway, it is said in the remembrance of a god and a lord that in Miquella's childhood, he saw in Radahn a lord due to his strength and kindness, and so it was that Miquella made the wish that Radahn would one day be his king consort. We even get Miquella's dialogue at the end of the DLC asking his lord brother Radahn directly. There are two follow-up questions we have to ask though. The first is why Radahn specifically was chosen when the other arguably just as strong, arguably just as kind, arguably even closer to Miquella brother Godwyn was also an option? And to be honest with you, there's no real answer for this. The only thing that I can speculate about is that at the time Miquella came to this conclusion, Godwyn must have already been killed by way of the Rune of Death, which as a reminder is able to actually permanently kill an individual's soul, preventing Miquella from attempting to resurrect him. If this is true, then the murder of Godwyn the Golden and Marika's shattering of the Elden Ring and all the subsequent chaos that ensued might have even been the very influence behind Miquella's purposing in his heart to make the world a gentler place by becoming a god himself.
That's a
and
cool
I suppose
theory.
the next best option for a benevolent leader for his required lord consort would be General Radahn. It is also curious that it wasn't his sister Malenia.
Yeah, I was
they're
wondering
both
about that.
extremely close, they love each other more than anything, and let's face it, it wouldn't really be a first for George R.R. Martin's writing. I mean, maybe it comes down to the simple concept of Miquella might just not have been into girls. But moving on though, the other question we have to ask is, what was Radahn's take on this whole consort thing? The short answer is that we have no idea. There's no recorded response from Radahn towards Miquella anywhere in the game or DLC. But the long answer is that we might actually be able to deduce that Radahn's response was less than accepting, and allow me to explain. For years now, we've had no
Well, there's the theory that Miquella had to warp him, right? Like, had to force this upon him. Wherein I don't think he would have had to force Malenia.
Conclusion as to why Malenia and Radahn were shown to be fighting one another when neither of them desired the Elden Throne, other than wild speculations. Until now. See, Radahn's young lion's helm finally tells us what Malenia whispered in Radahn's ears so long ago. After countless hours and days of non-stop battle with neither prevailing over the other, Malenia finally pulled out her nuclear option and sacrificed her unalloyed gold arm to getting close to Radahn, mount him, stab the both of them through at the same time, allowing her blood to drain into Radahn's body, while she unleashed the first scarlet bloom upon the world. Then she leaned in close to his ear and whispered the words,
"Oh, you gotta give him that hawk to it."
Just kidding, she said, "Miquella awaits thee, O promised consort."
Oh,
Keep in mind that
damn.
she tells him this knowing she has just killed him by infecting him with the rot, which was going to claim his life eventually, implying very strongly that this was her entire reason for trying to kill him in the first place. Because see, this wasn't just a little bout, a little duel. This was Malenia straight up trying to kill Radahn. I would say it's Radahn trying to kill Malenia, but I doubt that given the fact that he stands there and lets her put her arm back on before re-engaging. If he was trying to kill her, he would have taken that damage against her as means with which to take her life, but he didn't. The only way this makes sense to me is if Radahn declined to go along with Miquella's offer to become his consort. I mean, otherwise this fight wouldn't have happened and they would have both made the journey to the Gate of Divinity together. Furthermore, Radahn must have refused to even see Miquella after his request was made known to him. Given Miquella's tendency to, mind control people, this then forced Miquella to send his sister, the Blade of Miquella, to meet Radahn in combat, which of course was a challenge that the war general could not refuse. And he did meet Malenia in combat but would not kill her. However, Malenia's mission was to defeat and kill Radahn at any cost, so that Radahn could be forcibly resurrected into Mohg's body as Miquella's consort.
To make it so it had to happen. Oh god. Malenia! Ugh. Wow. To have that amount of, like, love for somebody to be like, oh, you want... Whew! Scary.
And due to the player tarnished killing both Radahn and Mohg, Miquella is successful. So at long last, when we finally approach the Gate of Divinity in the Land of Shadow, the final encounter takes place between the Lord Consort and you. Once again, we do not hear Radahn speak, but Miquella says the following.
My loyal blade and champion of the festival.
I was like, again, every time you speak, I'm like, sounds like a woman. Sounds like I don't know. There's reasons, okay? Look, everyone made fun of me for being like, you called him a girl. I'm like, sorry. I feel like sorry.
Both your deeds will ever be praised in song. Now, the vow will be honored, and my lord brother's soul will return, so that he may be my consort.
He addresses his loyal blade and the champion of the festival, which I can only assume means his sister, the Blade of Miquella, and the player tarnished, who defeated Radahn in said festival, praising the two of us for our deeds, since really it was both of us who helped this moment happen. He then states that the vow will be honored and his lord brother's soul will return, which to me implies that his soul is not quite back just yet. although it does appear to be mostly back. I'm not sure. You fight against Radahn's resurrected body, and if Ansbach is summoned for this fight, you even get some additional dialogue from him addressing Radahn directly and claiming that the body is not his, and Mohg's honor must be returned. Once you whittle Radahn down enough though, Miquella himself, who has officially attained godhood at this time,
does he even need the Lord anymore after he's already gotten to be the god? I don't think he needs him anymore, right?
Approaches from the gate and hops on the back of Radahn, addressing the player directly once again as the aspiring Lord of the Old Order, asking us to step aside so that he and Radahn can do their thing. At this point, we have 3 possible endings. The first is that we get our face smashed into the ground, which, let's be real, is going to happen at least 1 to 2,000 times because holy hell is that second face something else. I mean, I couldn't even see what was going on half the time.
Too many hairs.
But the second is that we successfully deny Miquella this new world and somehow manage to kill a literal god and his Elden Lord in combat, giving us access to the remembrance of a god and a lord, as well as the Light of Miquella incantation, which claims that Miquella sought to accept all that was and would be, but found one that refused to be embraced, that one being us, the player tarnished. However, the third ending is a speculative one that I am convinced is in the game somewhere but has yet to be found, and it entails essentially allowing Miquella to win. See, there appears to be dialogue that I found in a text dump of the DLC that is from Miquella, that is
I hereby swear to every living being and every living soul, now comes the age of our Eden, a 1,000-year voyage guided by compassion. Beginning here, love encompassed all. No living thing will be denied, no deed censured. Doesn't sound great. I am ready to embrace the whole of it. Let us go together, Radahn, my promised consort.
also yet to be found anywhere in the game where he says the following: I hereby swear to every living being and every living soul.
There's only like half of them he hasn't read out loud and half of them he has, so I decided to read it.
Now comes the age of our Eden, a 1,000-year voyage guided by compassion. Beginning here, love encompasses all. No living thing will be denied, no deed censured. I am ready to embrace the whole of it. Let us go together. Radahn, my promised consort. Notice how similar the wording of I hereby swear to every living being and every living soul is to Ranni's dialogue as she establishes her new order. And this parallel very much so implies to me that it's going to be Miquella establishing his new order. There is also clearly an in-game cutscene that was teased to us that, again, no one has been able to find just yet. And it's the one that we're shown for like 2 seconds at the end of the gameplay trailer, where Miquella, shining like a god, stretches his hand out towards the Haligtree and appears to heal it, also dispelling the shadow drapes in the sky above, which Miyazaki himself had confirmed in an interview is the reason the Land of Shadow is obscured from the rest of the lands between. My theory is that the way to get this cutscene is to allow Miquella to become a god, something that, remember, he only does officially when you enter the second phase of their fight, and then you allow him to steal your heart, which he will do if he's able to grab you twice and enchant you, which is really cool to see firsthand, which also ends the fight, placing you outside the Gate of Divinity without you dying necessarily. After this, I'm curious if that will then unlock a new ending to the base game, after returning to the Erd Tree and defeating the Elden Beast. That would allow us to choose to step aside while Miquella ascends to the status of God of the Lands Between, just like we would have done with Ranni, healing the Haligtree and by extension the Land of Shadow and entering a new age of compassion. The thing is, I already killed them in my playthrough, and at the moment I'm a bit too lazy to go through the entire game again just to test this one notion. But if someone out there wants to see if I'm right, try doing exactly what I just said, and then come back here and let me know what you found. We'll all be awaiting expectantly. That being said though, that officially wraps up the complete story of Miquella the Kind. From his birth, to his childhood, to the Haligtree, to the Land of Shadow and his ascension into godhood, however brief that might have been. At the end of it all, given that Miquella will mind control those who choose to not live peacefully, such as Ansbach, or you, or Needle Knight Leda, who admits to not trusting anyone when she's not under Miquella's charm, we're left with a question. Is a peaceful world that's devoid of free will worth it? Or should we fight to end anyone who would revoke our ability to make our own decisions, no matter how much peace they might promise?
The other thing too is like, yeah, that's terrifying. I hate the idea of there not being any free, someone just mind controlling everybody forever. Like, that sounds awful. Like, that's its own new kind of hell. But at the same time, this world sucks. I mean, there's a lot of bad shit in our real world, but like this world, this Dark Souls thing, like, But this Elden Ring lore, like all of that is real. I think not. Yeah, Elden Ring. It's like, it feels like this is a terrible, terrible world. Like there's so many like horrible monsters and stuff. And so it's like, would just getting rid of Marika's influence like disperse that? Would that make it better? Because it seems like this is a horrible, deviant kind of place. So it's like, maybe Miquella's right? I don't know.
This moral question is just one of the many, many reasons why Elden Ring's story is so good. And thank you so much for watching my breakdown of one portion of it. If you enjoyed this video,
Thanks for
please
doing it.
consider leaving a like on it to get it spread around on YouTube more. It really helps more than you know, and these kinds of videos take a lot of time to create, so I would really appreciate
like
it.
it.
And once again, make sure you're subscribed for more Elden Ring lore to come. As always, huge thanks to my Bandit crew for making my day every day and supporting the channel, allowing me to continue making content. You guys are the reason I do what I do. That's all I've got for this one, so as always, keep up with me on my socials, and I'll see you next time. This has been...
Okay. Great. That was good. I did enjoy that. Was interesting. Boink. Give it a little like. All right. So I have learned some stuff. Learned some stuff and things. I have more questions now. But that's okay. That's allowed, having more questions now. And again, I might just keep doing some more like exploration into this world, into this game. Like seems like the lore is deep. Dark and full of terrors. Thank you all so much for watching. If there's anything else that you would like me to look at here by this creator, by any other creator, link it in the description, like link it to me in the comments. I feel I've gotten a lot of comments that were like, this was a terrible video that this person, she watched a bad video. She sort of watched a different one, but it's like, but they didn't link one. It's like, there's only so much I can do. I can find videos that have a lot of, views, and a reasonable amount of likes to view ratio. And that is often how I determine what I'm going to watch. So thank you for watching. Again, if you've got any thing that you particularly want me to look at, let me know. And I will take a peek. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.